He knocked like a man running out of time. Not polite, not patient. 3 hard strikes that sounded more like fear than manners. Eliza's heart froze with the spoon halfway to her mouth. The thin stew barely steamed, but her heart raced as if it were boiling over. No one came to her cabin. Not in winter, not up on this mountain ridge, and never after dark. She stood still, listening. Wind pressed against the logs, snow hissed across the roof. Then came another knock. Softer this time, almost begging. Eliza reached for her father's old rifle, fingers stiff with cold and doubt. She stepped toward the door and peered through the frost-clouded glass. What she saw made her breath catch. A tall cowboy stood there, shoulders bowed against the storm. His coat was soaked through. In his arms he held a small boy, limp and unmoving. 2 horses stood behind them, heads low, sides trembling, near collapse. The boy's lips were blue. Eliza's hand tightened on the rifle. The last strangers who came here had laughed at her patched dress and empty shelves. They had ridden off warm and fed, leaving her with shame and silence. But her father's voice rose in her memory, clear as the axe he once carried. Hospitality ain't optional in a storm. Eliza set the rifle down. She opened the door. Snow rushed in like a living thing, biting her ankles, stealing her breath. The cowboy staggered forward, relief breaking through his exhaustion. "Ma'am," he said. Just that, one word, cracked and dry, like he'd carried it a long way. "Inside," Eliza said quickly, "by the fire." They crossed the threshold, dragging the storm in with them. When she slammed the door shut, the howling outside dulled to a distant roar. Silence fell heavy between them. The cowboy knelt by the hearth without being told. Eliza grabbed her only spare quilt, the one her mother stitched before dying, and wrapped it around the child. The boy couldn't have been more than 8. His clothes were fine but worn. His hands felt like ice. "How long you been riding?" she asked, already filling the kettle. "Too long," the man said. His voice broke. She poured weak coffee and ladled stew into 2 chipped bowls. The cowboy barely touched his food. He watched his son instead, eyes sharp with a fear that had not left him yet. When the boy finally stirred, his eyes opened slow, blue, clear, alive. "Thank you, miss," the child whispered. Something cracked inside Eliza's chest. Night deepened. The storm raged on. Eliza added logs to the fire and tried not to notice how the cowboy watched her, not with threat, but with quiet disbelief, as if kindness had surprised him. The boy fell asleep wrapped in her mother's quilt. The cowboy stood at the window, staring into the white nothing beyond the glass. They aren't just lost, Eliza realized. They're running. She woke before dawn to find him already awake, seated near the dying fire, guarding his sleeping son like a treasure. Pale light slipped through the shutters. "Morning," she said softly. He nodded. No words. Eliza mixed what little flour she had left, stretching it into biscuits. A jar of preserved plum jam sat nearly empty. Coffee grounds were thin. The cowboy stood and helped without asking, hands steady, movements practiced. When the boy woke, he sat up slowly. "Where are we?" "Safe," the cowboy said. "For now." "Might I have a biscuit, miss?" the boy asked, his words careful, polite in a way that didn't match the trail. "All you want," Eliza said. As they ate, she noticed things. The horses outside were fine stock, even under dirt and snow. The cowboy's coat was worn thin, but every stitch was precise. The boy's hands were soft, clean. These weren't ordinary drifters. "How far were you headed?" she asked. "Far enough," the cowboy said. She looked outside. "Storm's not done. Trails won't clear for days." He stiffened. "We can't stay." "You can't ride," she said. "Your horses are spent." Your boy nearly froze. Pride and need warred behind his eyes. Finally, he exhaled. 3 days. 3 days. Eliza agreed. The boy smiled. Small, careful. "I'm Samuel," he said. "This is my pa." "Daniel," the man added. "Eliza," she said. They shook hands across a rough table. His grip was calloused, but gentle. That day, Daniel split wood with a steady rhythm Eliza hadn't heard since her father died. Each strike echoed through her bones. Samuel darted around the yard, laughter bright against the snow, gathering eggs with careful hands. That evening, Daniel sat across from her at the table. "Your father raised you right," he said. "He raised me alone," Eliza replied. "Mama died early." Daniel nodded. "So did Samuel's." The words settled between them, cold, heavy. Later, when she hung his coat to dry, something slipped from the pocket, a gold pocket watch, heavy, engraved, not the kind a drifter owned. Eliza stared at it, heart thudding. Then she tucked it back without a word. The third morning broke clear and sharp. The trail down the mountain glimmered with promise. Samuel stood on the porch, pleading. "Can't we stay longer, Pa?" Daniel answered softly, "So do I, son." Eliza turned away, heart racing. "Your horse threw a shoe," she said suddenly. Daniel checked. "One more day," he said. Samuel whooped with joy. Eliza smiled to herself. Just one more day, she told herself. She didn't know yet how much that lie would cost her, or how much it would save. Morning settled slow over the ridge, quiet, clean, almost gentle. Eliza stood at the window, watching Daniel work. He moved with purpose, like a man used to fixing what was broken. The barn door that had sagged for years now hung straight. The loose fence post stood firm again. Each repair felt like a promise she hadn't asked for. Samuel darted around the yard, boots too big for his feet, chasing the hens with more laughter than sense. He ran up to Eliza, cheeks red from the cold. "6 eggs," he said proudly. "That's the most we've had all week." "They must like the company," Eliza said. She surprised herself by smiling. Inside, the cabin felt different, warmer. Not just from the fire. Voices filled spaces that had held only echoes. Eliza hadn't realized how heavy the silence had been until it was gone. That afternoon, Daniel stacked firewood until her pile doubled. His breath fogged the air. His hands were cracked, bleeding in places, but he never slowed. "You don't have to do all that," Eliza said. "We do," he replied simply. At supper, they ate together like it was the most natural thing in the world. Samuel talked about everything: the horses, the snow, how the cabin smelled like pine and bread. Daniel listened, watched, always watching. Later, when Samuel fell asleep by the hearth, Daniel spoke again. "Your place," he said. "It's strong." "It has to be," Eliza answered. "No one else is keeping it standing." Daniel nodded. "Same for us." She didn't ask what he meant. She didn't need to. That night, Eliza woke to the sound of hooves. Torchlight flickered across the snow outside. Her heart jumped into her throat. Daniel was already at the door. "Get inside," he said quietly. Before she could move, the riders entered the yard. 3 men. One rode ahead, sitting tall like the land belonged to him. He wore fine wool and a sharp smile. "Well now," the man called. "Didn't expect company up here." Eliza stepped forward. "You have no business here, Lucas." Lucas tipped his hat. "Just checking on you. Storm hit hard." His eyes slid to Daniel, then to Samuel, half hidden behind him. "And who's this?" Lucas asked. "Guests," Eliza said. Her voice was steady. Her hands were not. Lucas smirked. "Careful who you take in. Folks talk." Daniel didn't move, didn't speak. Something about his stillness made Lucas's horse shift uneasy. "Railroad's coming through," Lucas continued. "Your land's in the way. I'm authorized to make an offer." "Not for sale," Eliza said. Lucas's smile thinned. "Banknotes due soon. Shame to lose everything." Daniel stepped forward just enough to matter. "That's enough," he said. Lucas laughed, sharp and hollow. "And you are?" "Doesn't matter." Lucas studied him, then leaned back in his saddle. "Check his bags," he said to his men. "See what he's hiding." Get off my land, Eliza snapped. Lucas's eyes hardened. Think on my offer. They rode off, leaving the yard torn and quiet. Samuel's hand shook in Daniel's grip. That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. Anger warred with fear. Shame burned hot in her chest. She had worked herself raw to keep this place. And still men like Lucas circled, waiting. She turned to Daniel. Tell me the truth. He met her eyes. There was pain there, old, deep. I'm trying to do right, he said. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. The words cut more than she expected. Then leave, she said. Silence followed, heavy, final. Samuel appeared in the doorway, tears streaking his face. Miss Eliza, please. I'm sorry, she whispered. She closed the door. Before dawn, she heard them packing. Every sound felt like a nail driven deeper. She stayed by the window, watching without being seen. Samuel clung to the porch rail, sobbing. We can't leave her, Pa. She asked us to, Daniel said gently. Those words broke her. Hooves faded down the trail, gone. Eliza slid down the wall and wept like she hadn't since her father died. Hours passed. The sun climbed. The cabin felt hollow again. A knock startled her. Old Jonah stood there, hat in his hands. Her nearest neighbor. 5 miles away and rarely seen. I saw them ride out, he said. You know who that was? She shook her head. Daniel Harrington, Jonah said quietly. Railroad heir. Richest family in 3 territories. The truth hit like a blow. He walked away from it, Jonah continued. After his wife died, took the boy. Been living rough ever since. Eliza's hands trembled. Lucas plans to expose him tonight. Town square. Eliza didn't hesitate. She grabbed her coat and ran. The ride down the mountain was brutal. Ice hid beneath snow. The wind cut deep, but she pushed her mare hard. Because this time, she wasn't running away. The town lights came into view at dusk. A crowd had gathered. Lucas's voice rang loud. There he is, Daniel Harrington, hiding like a coward. Eliza rode straight into the square. Mud splashed. People gasped. She dismounted and stood between Lucas and Daniel. Say what you want about me, she said, but he is a good man. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lucas sneered. He lied to you. He worked, Eliza said. He fixed my land. He treated me with respect. Daniel stepped forward. I hid my name, not my hands. Lucas laughed. Banknotes do. She's finished. Daniel pulled a paper from his coat. Already paid. Quote, silence fell. Eliza stared at him. You paid it? Quote, I wanted you free, he said. Samuel ran forward, grabbing both their hands. Can we go home now? He whispered. Eliza looked at Daniel, at Samuel. Yes, she said softly. Let's go home. But the storm outside was not finished yet. The ride back up the mountain felt different, not rushed, not desperate, heavy with things left unsaid. Eliza rode beside Daniel in silence. Samuel sat between them at times, switching horses when his legs tired. The boy kept glancing from one adult to the other, like he was afraid one of them might disappear if he looked away too long. The sky darkened as they climbed. Clouds gathered low and thick. Snow threatened again. When the cabin finally came into view, smoke long gone from the chimney, Eliza's chest tightened. The place looked smaller now, quieter, like it had been holding its breath. Daniel dismounted first. He lifted Samuel down and set him on the porch. Go inside, he said gently. Get warm. Samuel obeyed, but not before grabbing Eliza's hand for a second, just long enough to remind her why she had ridden so hard. Daniel turned to her. You didn't have to come. Yes, she said. I did. They stood there, the wind brushing between them, carrying the smell of pine and snow. I should have told you, Daniel said, about who I was. You wanted one place, Eliza replied, where your name didn't come first. He nodded. Relief flickered across his face. Then fear followed. I won't stay if you don't want us, he said. I already took enough. Eliza looked at the cabin, the fence he had fixed, the woodpile stacked high, the marks of him everywhere. "I sent you away because I was scared," she said. "Not of you, of what I felt." Daniel's breath caught. They went inside together. The cabin warmed quickly. Samuel was asleep within minutes, curled by the hearth like he'd never left. Eliza watched him for a long moment before turning away. That night, sleep came in pieces. Eliza lay awake, listening to Daniel's quiet movements across the room. The fire popped. The wind pressed against the logs. "You regret it?" she asked suddenly. "No," Daniel said at once, "not for a second." Silence stretched. "I don't know how to stay halfway," he added. "If we stay, it's all the way." Eliza swallowed. "So do I." Morning came pale and cold. Snow dusted the world clean again. Daniel was already outside, checking the horses. Samuel followed, bundled and bright. They worked together that day without talking much. Eliza patched clothes. Daniel repaired the roof where ice had cracked the shingles. Samuel helped everywhere and nowhere, full of energy. By evening, the cabin felt alive again. Daniel sat at the table, hands folded. "There's more you should know." Eliza nodded. "I'm listening." "My family won't stop," he said. "They'll send men, papers, pressure." Eliza met his gaze. "This land is mine." "And I won't let them take it," he said. The words weren't a promise, they were a vow. That night, Samuel woke crying. Daniel soothed him, voice low and steady. Eliza watched from the doorway, something warm and aching blooming in her chest. In the days that followed, winter loosened its grip. Not gone, just softer. They fell into a rhythm that felt earned. Shared meals, shared work, shared quiet. Samuel began calling Eliza Miss Less and Ma'am, not at all. One evening, while Daniel split wood, Eliza found the gold pocket watch again. She held it longer this time. "Why keep it?" she asked him later. "Because it reminds me of what I walked away from," he said. "And why?" She handed it back. "You don't have to prove anything here." He looked at her like that meant more than she knew. That night, they stood outside under a sky scattered with stars. The world felt vast and small all at once. "I don't know what tomorrow brings," Daniel said. Eliza slipped her hand into his. "Neither do I." But for the first time in a long while, the unknown didn't feel like something to fear. It felt like a beginning. Spring tried to arrive. Winter argued back. The snow thinned along the ridge, pulling away in patches that showed brown earth beneath. Water ran in narrow streams down the slope, cold and fast. Eliza welcomed the sound. It meant the mountain was changing, even if slowly. So were they. Daniel rose early each morning, splitting wood, mending tools, fixing what winter had strained. He worked with the patience of a man who had learned how quickly things could be taken away. Eliza matched his rhythm. She planted where the ground allowed, repaired clothes, and stretched meals without complaint. Samuel thrived. His cough faded. Color returned to his cheeks. He laughed more than he slept, and slept more than he cried. He followed Daniel everywhere, asking questions that never seemed to end. Eliza watched them together, father and son, bent close over small tasks, heads touching. She had never seen that kind of steadiness before, not even with her own father, who had loved her deeply but carried the weight of too much alone. One afternoon, while Daniel was down by the creek checking a fallen log bridge, a rider appeared on the trail below. Eliza saw him first. Her stomach tightened. The horse was fresh. The rider wore a city coat not made for mountain weather. Papers stuck out from a leather satchel at his side. Daniel followed her gaze and went still. "They've found us," he said quietly. The man rode into the yard and dismounted without greeting. He cleared his throat like he owned the air. "Daniel Harrington," he said, "by authority of the family trust." Samuel stepped back, confused. Daniel didn't move. "You're trespassing." The man smiled thinly. "You walked away. Doesn't mean the world lets go." He held out papers. Your presence here complicates things. The railroad needs clarity. So does your family. Eliza stepped forward. This is my land. The man glanced at her, uninterested. Temporary arrangements don't change blood. Daniel's jaw tightened. Leave. You have until summer, the man said. After that, the mountain won't feel so quiet. He mounted and rode off, leaving silence behind him like a threat. Samuel's voice shook. Pa? Daniel knelt. It's all right. But Eliza saw the lie. That night, Daniel barely ate. He stared into the fire, thoughts heavy and loud. Eliza waited until Samuel slept before speaking. They won't stop, she said. No, Daniel agreed. Then what happens to us? Quote, he finally looked at her. That depends on what you want. Eliza swallowed. She had lived her whole life surviving, not choosing. The mountain had taught her endurance, not hope. I want this, she said. I want you both. Daniel exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for months. But I won't be the reason you lose your son, she added. You're the reason I found him again, he said. Days passed. The man didn't return, but his shadow lingered. Daniel began reinforcing the barn, fixing the roof, securing the land like someone preparing for siege. Eliza noticed, said nothing. One evening, Samuel came inside holding a bundle of wildflowers. For Ma, he said, shy but proud. Eliza froze. Daniel did too. Samuel frowned. Is that bad? Quote, Eliza knelt and pulled him into a hug. No, she whispered. It's perfect. The words settled into the cabin, soft, certain. Later, Daniel stood by the door, watching the sun dip behind the ridge. He started calling you that on his own, he said. I didn't ask him to, Eliza replied. I know. Silence followed, thick with meaning. I want to do this right, Daniel said at last. Not borrowed time, not hiding. Eliza looked at him. Then don't run. I won't, he said, but I need to know you're choosing this, knowing what comes with me. She thought of the storm, the knock, the boy's blue lips, the fire that had warmed more than skin. I chose it the night I opened the door, she said. Daniel reached into his coat and hesitated. Not yet, Eliza said gently. He nodded, understanding, trusting. Spring finally pushed through in earnest. Grass returned. Birds called. The mountain breathed easier. Then Lucas came back. He didn't come alone. 2 men rode with him, armed and smug. Lucas smiled like a man who thought time favored him. Didn't expect to see you still here, he said. Daniel stepped forward. You've said your piece. Lucas laughed. I've said nothing yet. Town meetings next week. Railroad wants signatures. Yours too, Eliza. My answer hasn't changed, she said. Lucas's eyes slid to Daniel. He's trouble. He's family, she replied. Lucas's smile faded. Think carefully. Quote, they rode off, leaving the threat hanging like a storm cloud. That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. Daniel sat beside her, the cabin quiet. If they force it, he said, I'll leave. No, she said. I won't let them destroy what you built. They won't, she said, not without a fight. He studied her face, strong, tired, unyielding. Samuel stirred in his sleep, murmuring her name. Daniel closed his eyes. For the first time since the knock that changed everything, he was afraid. Not of losing wealth, but of losing home. The meeting came faster than Eliza expected. Too fast for comfort. Too slow for peace. By the time the sun rose on the day Lucas had named, the mountain already felt restless. Wind moved through the trees in uneven breaths. Clouds hung low, undecided. Eliza felt it in her bones, the same way she had felt the storm before the knocking ever came. Daniel was quiet that morning. Not distant. Focused. He fixed his son's coat buttons with care, smoothing the fabric as if each touch mattered. Samuel watched him. Are we in trouble, Pa? Daniel smiled gently. No, son, we're just standing our ground. Eliza packed bread and dried meat. Her hands shook, but she didn't stop. She refused to let fear see her bend. They rode down together, Eliza on her mare, Daniel beside her, Samuel between them again, holding tight when the trail narrowed. The town looked smaller than she remembered, meaner somehow. Windows watched them pass, people gathered in the square, farmers, shopkeepers, men who had never lifted a hand to help her when her roof leaked or her father died. Lucas stood near the hotel porch, confident, waiting. "This land is needed," Lucas announced loudly. "Progress doesn't pause for sentiment." Eliza dismounted before Daniel could stop her. "My land isn't empty," she said. "It holds my home." Murmurs moved through the crowd. Lucas turned to Daniel. "And you don't belong here." Daniel stepped forward, calm and solid. "Neither does greed." Lucas laughed. "You walked away from everything. Why cling to this?" Quote. Daniel didn't answer at first. He looked at Samuel, at Eliza, at the faces around him. "Because this," he said slowly, "is the first place my son has slept without fear." Silence fell. A man from the railroad stepped up, papers in hand. "Sign, and the matter ends clean." Eliza shook her head. "No." Lucas's voice sharpened. "Then you lose everything." Daniel reached into his coat. He pulled out a folded document and handed it to the railroad man. "What's this?" Lucas snapped. "A counteroffer," Daniel said. "The land stays." "The railroad reroutes through the East Pass." "That costs money," Lucas scoffed. "I have it," Daniel replied. Lucas stared. "You won't win." Daniel met his gaze. "I already did." The railroad man read the papers again, nodded. "This is valid." The crowd stirred. Lucas's confidence cracked. "You think this makes you a hero?" Lucas hissed. "No," Daniel said. "It makes me done." Lucas turned away, defeated, his power slipping like sand through his fingers. The meeting broke apart quietly. People avoided Eliza's eyes. Some nodded. Some looked ashamed. The ride back up the mountain was slower, heavier, but freer. At the cabin, Samuel ran ahead, laughing as if the world had righted itself. Eliza lingered near the porch. Daniel joined her. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I wanted to," he replied. "Not for the land, for us." She studied his face, the lines earned by grief and love both. "What happens now?" she asked. Daniel took a breath, a steady one. "I stop running." That night, he built a fire strong and warm. Samuel fell asleep early, exhausted but smiling. Eliza and Daniel sat together, close but not touching. Daniel reached into his coat again. This time, he didn't hesitate. He held out a simple gold ring, worn smooth by years. "My mother's," he said. "I kept it for the right woman." Eliza's throat tightened. "I won't promise you ease," Daniel continued, "or safety from the world, but I will promise you this will always be home if you want it." Eliza didn't answer right away. She walked to the mantel and lifted her father's old pocket watch. The glass was scratched, the chain thin. She placed it in Samuel's hands when he padded into the room, half asleep. "Your grandfather's," she said. "He'd want you to have it." Samuel's eyes widened. "Does this mean—" "Yes," Eliza said softly. Daniel exhaled, a sound that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. He pulled her close, careful and sure. The fire crackled. The wind eased outside. Spring arrived fully a week later. Wildflowers dotted the ridge. The snow finally retreated for good. They married quietly. No crowd. Just the mountain and the sky and old Jonah standing witness. Eliza wore her mother's dress, let out at the seams. Samuel stood proud between them. Life settled into something steady. Daniel built a second room onto the cabin. A proper barn. A fence that would last decades. One evening, Eliza stood in the doorway watching Samuel chase chickens through the meadow. Daniel came up behind her, hands warm on her shoulders. "You ever regret it?" she asked. Daniel shook his head. "Best trade I ever made." Eliza rested a hand on her belly, a secret growing quietly. The future felt close now, tangible. The mountain held them, and for the first time in her life, Eliza knew this wasn't borrowed peace. It was earned. Summer arrived slow and certain, not loud, not rushed. It settled into the mountain like it belonged there. Eliza woke each morning to the sound of Daniel splitting wood and Samuel humming off key while feeding the chickens. The cabin that once echoed with loneliness now breathed with life. Smoke curled steady from the chimney. Footsteps crossed the floor without hesitation. Home had learned their names. Eliza moved carefully these days. Not weak, just aware. One hand often rested on her belly, feeling the quiet promise growing there. Daniel noticed everything. He opened doors before she reached them, lifted heavy things without comment, watched her with a kind of awe that still surprised him. Samuel noticed too. "Pa," he whispered one night while they sat on the porch watching fireflies, "the baby gonna sleep by the fire like I did?" Daniel smiled. "If they want to." Samuel nodded, satisfied. Then he leaned against Eliza's side, head fitting there like it always had. The mountain bloomed. Wild roses climbed the ridge in pink waves. Bees hummed. The creek ran clear and calm. The railroad still came through the valley far below, but it never touched their land. Lucas did not return. Sometimes Eliza thought about him, about the way fear wore the shape of power in some men. Then she looked at Daniel, bent over a fence post, patient and steady, and the thought passed. One afternoon, a letter arrived, delivered by a boy from town who wouldn't meet Daniel's eyes. Daniel read it slowly, once, then folded it and placed it into the fire. "Family?" Eliza asked. "Yes." "Anything we need to worry about?" "No," he said, and for the first time he meant it fully. They stood together watching the paper curl into ash, the past burning away without drama. That evening, after Samuel fell asleep clutching the pocket watch Eliza had given him, Daniel and Eliza sat side by side in the doorway. The sky burned orange and gold. The world felt wide, but it no longer felt empty. "You know," Eliza said quietly, "I almost didn't open the door that night." Daniel turned to her. "I know." Quote, "I was tired," she continued, "angry at the cold, at being alone. I told myself no one ever came to help me. Why should I help anyone else?" Quote, Daniel took her hand. "But you did." She nodded, and everything changed. Daniel leaned his forehead against hers. "Best mistake I ever made. Getting lost on that mountain." "It wasn't a mistake," Eliza said. "It was mercy on all of us." They stayed there until the stars came out one by one. The same sky that had once felt endless and uncaring now felt like a roof over something sacred. Late August brought heat and fullness. The garden overflowed. Samuel grew taller, stronger, louder. He called Eliza Ma without thinking now. The word had settled into his mouth like it had always lived there. One morning he ran into the cabin, breathless. "Ma, Pa, come see." They followed him up the path to the ridge where the wild roses grew thickest. Samuel picked one carefully and tucked it behind Eliza's ear. "For the prettiest Ma on the mountain," he said solemnly. Eliza laughed, tears blurring her vision. Daniel wrapped his arms around both of them, holding tight. That night, after Samuel slept, Eliza and Daniel sat on the porch again. Fireflies drifted through the meadow like sparks that refused to die. "You ever miss it?" Eliza asked. "The old life, the money, the ease." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "I don't miss being surrounded by people who didn't know me," he said. "I don't miss teaching my son that worth comes from a name instead of a choice." He turned to her. "I didn't give anything up. I traded it." Eliza smiled. "For something real." "For something real," he agreed. The baby kicked beneath her hand, strong, certain. Daniel felt it and laughed softly, eyes shining. Winter would come again. Storms would return. The mountain would test them the way it always did. But Eliza no longer feared the knocking of the wind. She knew what lived inside her walls now. Love earned, trust chosen. A family built not from wealth, but from a single night of mercy and the courage to keep saying yes afterward. She had opened her door to strangers in a storm. They had walked in and never truly left. And on that ridge, far from the noise of power and gold, a poor young girl had found the richest life she could imagine.